Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to Rocket Summer 2025, Michael K. Vaughan's beloved BookTube event where we read classic science fiction during the hot, hot days of July here in the Northern Hemisphere. With the first week, if you want to go by week programs, or if you don't have to do that, Michael K. Vaughan is incredibly friendly. You can read any classic science fiction that you want at any time during July, and he will be welcoming you to Rocket Summer. But if you want to stick to parameters, there are some. And the first week of Rocket Summer, the week that we're ending now, is the earliest days of science fiction. So Jules Verne, H.G. Wells, Edgar Rice Burroughs, maybe depending on how far you stretch things, H.P. Lovecraft, a few others. Actually, there are plenty of other names from the 1930s. You want to go from the earliest parts of science fiction to and through the 1930s. I have not been having a good track record trying to do that outside of cheating. I have been cheating during most of the first week of Rocket Summer. I have been cheating by reading Edgar Rice Burroughs stories that are mainly science fantasy. There's not really much science in them at all. There's time travel or something like that, but not really. And I have been cheating blatantly out in the open, mainly because I know I can get away with it if it's Michael K. Vaughan's event and I'm cheating with Edgar Rice Burroughs. I'm going to get a pass if I do that. But that was preying on my mind, and I was thinking, what about the other founders of science fiction? So last night, I read a Jules Verne science fiction novel. We don't need to dwell on which one it was. It was not any of the famous ones, and it was awful. Just awful. Now, even the famous ones are awful in terms of most of the reasons that I would go to a science fiction novel. I don't expect science fiction novels to be accurate prophecies of the future. That would be extremely unfair. That'd be an unrealistic expectation. But I don't expect them to be wrong about basic physics. And yet, we tend to forget that our basic elementary level education knowledge of science, physics, that sort of thing, is better than some of the leading lights in the field 150 years ago. I read a novel by Jules Verne that, among other things, had all sorts of things wrong about the tolerance of the human body for extreme temperatures or extreme speeds. And it wasn't Jules Verne being a moron. Only a generation before he wrote the book in question, in other words, when he would have been paying attention, it was widely theorized by even serious scientists that the human body could not withstand speeds of more than 60 miles an hour. That if the human body were somehow put in a conveyance that traveled faster than that, it would start to stress and fall apart. I thought foundational figure, might as well try it, and it sent me fleeing away from foundational figures, respectable academic Penguin classic figures of science fiction, straight back into the arms of Edgar Rice Burroughs. Now, I don't need much urging in that way anyway. I love Edgar Rice Burroughs. I have loved him forever and ever. I have read him my whole reading life. He can, as far as I'm concerned, do no wrong. He's one of those authors that you love early, despite there manifest flaws, and then the flaws only make you smile after that. Oh, God. Oh, God. What are you doing? Oh. What are you doing? What are you thinking about? Huh? What are you thinking about? Hi, baby. How's my little raccoon? Hi, baby. Who's my squeak? What are you going to do? You going to go over to your chair? Oh, no, you're going to go down onto the floor. Okay, all right. Frida drama done for today. I went fleeing back to Edgar Rice Burroughs. Now, I felt a little guilty reading things like The Eternal Savage that are only nominally science fiction. So for last night, I reread something that I have read. I do not need to read this book again. I have read it probably, I honestly don't know, conservatively 100 times. Conservatively, I have. I went and reread A Fighting Man of Mars. This is the 7th novel in Edgar Rice Burroughs' Barsoom stories, set on a fantasy science version of the planet Mars. You've got your Bob Abbott cover there. That's just fantastic cover there. These stories are started off with Under the Moon of Mars, The Princess of Mars, where a human being named John Carter is transported to the planet Mars. And it is very much the planet Mars of Percival Lowell. It's the planet Mars that is an Earth-like but a dying planet, a planet that is where the surface water is disappearing. So canals are necessary and whatnot. That it's very hot and very arid, but that it is fully populated from top to bottom with alien exotic races, most of whom are sentient. Just alien. And it's also an alien world. John Carter examines this world. It's many of the species are telepathic. Quite a few of them are multi-legged. They don't have the 2 arms and 2 legs body plan. Some of them do. The red people of the planet do. But quite a few species don't. They have multiple legs, multiple arms. Apparently, almost every species on Barsoom, which is what the natives call Mars, is oviparous. They lay eggs. They don't give birth to live young. And many, many other things in addition to that, including the central mystery of John Carter himself, who, being an Earthman from a much higher gravity planet, has superpowers when he goes to Mars. He can leap 1/8 of a mile. He's incredibly fast and incredibly strong. And also John Carter himself alone is odd even beyond that, in that he appears to be immortal. He does not remember ever being a child, and has been alive and fighting, a fighting man with sword and fists for centuries. He goes to Mars, to this Barsoom, and has adventures. And Edgar Rice Burroughs gives us a Barsoom that is a science fiction destination. This is actually not cheating, in the sense that the other Edgar Rice Burroughs things that I read were. Because it's easy to imagine that the Mars that John Carter goes to is displaced not only in space, but in time. It's easy to imagine that. And not entirely impossible if you do that. A long, long, long time ago, Mars not only had an active magnetosphere, in other words, to protect its surface from solar radiation that would otherwise make life impossible, but probably also had blue water oceans, maybe trees, maybe vegetation, maybe life. If you go back far enough, you find a Mars that was a world that maybe, sorta, could be this world. So, and also the Barsoom that Edgar Rice Burroughs invented, in addition to all of these strange life forms, which are themselves internally consistent, has technology. It has radium pistols. In other words, they aren't gunpowder, but they do work. They have a science behind them of their own. There are incubation chambers. There are airships of all sizes that have an anti-gravity bladder, a kind of anti-gravity engine that allows them to float and also maneuver. There are atmosphere plants. There is science on Barsoom, and it is not Earth science. It is carefully constructed, but it is alien. So this counts. By any measure, this counts for science fiction. The only reason that this is cheating for Rocket Summer is not because it's like The Eternal Savage or something, or At the Earth's Core or something like that, where it's very soft on the science. It isn't. The Barsoom stories are not soft on the science. The only reason that this, I think, would count as cheating, I don't think that Michael K. Vaughan, of all people, is in any position to criticize me on the subject, is simply because of how many times I've read this. It's ridiculous. With all the science fiction out there, that when I was repulsed by a crappy Jules Verne novel, I went running to this. But I did. And this is a heck of an adventure story. Oh my. It's about a young man, a Padawan, a swordsman, named Hadron of Hastur. He is everything that an Edgar Rice Burroughs character, that an Edgar Rice Burroughs hero always is. He is noble and brave and physically accomplished and romantic and chivalrous. He sounds, and I imagine looks, like he has stepped straight out of a Prince Valiant comic. And he is rushing to the rescue of Sonoma Tora, a beautiful princess who's way above his pay grade, who has been kidnapped by a guy named Axtar, a prominent figure with a domesticated evil super genius in tow from a rival city. Axtar has captured her, and Hadron of Hastur is going to flee. He's going to rush to her rescue. Rush before anyone else can rush to her rescue. Hadron of Hastur is actually in the employ of John Carter of Mars, the warlord of Mars. But he's impetuous, and he rushes off to save her, and is distracted in his quest by a slave girl named Tavia, who eventually gets him to bring her back to her own hometown. They both are captured. They both have lots and lots of adventures. And slowly, Hadron's heart, his noble heart, his heart that aspires to the hand of this glorious princess, Sonoma Tora, gradually his heart is changed. He begins to see love in places that he did not expect it before. He begins to experience love. He describes himself very romantically. Let's see here. If you speak the truth, man, you will have won the friendship of Padwar, whose sword is not so mean, but that it may protect you, even from a powerful noble. And that is Hastur talking about himself. But at one point in the book, he experiences love. True love. Not a chivalric pose, but the real thing. And as is true so often in Edgar Rice Burroughs, especially in the Barsoom novels, love is violent. I won't say how this reflects on Edgar Rice Burroughs' own life, but this is Hastur's response to feeling love. I do not love her, I said. She is only a friend. But I scarcely knew what I was saying. The words seemed to come mechanically, for I was in the grip of such an emotion as I never before had experienced or endured. It had seized me the instant that Fao had suggested that Yo Seno might have visited Tavia through that secret corridor. I experienced a sensation that was almost akin to a convulsion, a sensation that left me a changed man. Before, I could have killed Yo Seno with my sword and been glad. Now, I wanted to tear him to pieces. I wanted to mutilate him and make him suffer. Never before in my life had I experienced such a bestial desire. It was hideous, and yet I gloated in its possession. And the mere thought that one of these villains has approached Tavia, it means nothing to him. I'm not in love with her. I'm saving myself for Sonoma Tora. And the mere thought that one of the bad guys has approached her, he feels a convulsion of murderous, butchering rage that is love. And this goes on and on and on. It turns out that this tall Axtar guy has more of a plan in mind than simply abducting a princess. He is building an army, a big, advanced army with, thanks to that super genius, a super weapon. In order to take over Barsoom, in order to wrest the warlordship from John Carter. So it's a massive story that is building in the background of what is here a fighting man, virtuous swords type adventure, a Prince Hal type adventure. There's a massive story building in the background, especially since eventually our hero learns that John Carter and his fleet from Helium have set out. He set out first, impulsively. But John Carter is walking into a trap that could destroy his power base. So you get that building to a climax as well. I am not in any position to criticize, to read John Carter, to read Edgar Rice Burroughs at all, but especially the Barsoom stories. I'm not in any position to read them critically, not at all. And before you start pitying me, remember, you have books like that yourself that you couldn't read critically if your life depended on it. I am no longer in a position at all to read these things critically, and I don't have the stopgap that Michael K. Vaughan does, I mean, I think he would probably admit that he's probably not in a position to read Edgar Rice or Robert E. Howard critically anymore. He loves Robert E. Howard's writing so much, but he has a stopgap. And it's got to be pretty pleasant, because the stopgap that he has with Robert E. Howard is, okay, I might not be in a position to read these things critically. I love them too much. But I know that people do read them critically and find lots of genuine talent there. And I don't think that anyone has really thought that about Edgar Rice Burroughs. So, I mean, Mike loves Edgar Rice Burroughs as well, but you don't have that stopgap. He's pretty pulpy. You just have to love him anyway, because it's unlikely that there are going to be seminars or anything like that about the chessmen of Mars or about giant white apes or whatever. I don't have that stopgap with Fighting Men of Mars. If I did, theoretically, I would say that the ending is poorly paced. You're building up to a massive climax in the book that doesn't really happen, not to the way that it should. But I don't feel that way. I could point that out bloodlessly, but I don't feel that way. All I was happy. All I was happy just reading this again, and I might read this next year for all I know. I have no idea how many times I've read this book. But I considered that I was owed a fantastic, fun reading experience by reading the crappy science fiction that fills the 1920s and 30s. I know that the actually Dude Bro readers are going to say, well, no, actually, the best science fiction, it peaked in the 1920s. But no, I'm going to be happy to move on to the 1940s. And I'm not going to be all that happy then. The 1940s is still, science fiction is still writing in almost complete ignorance of science, of the science part of science fiction. In the 1940s, that ignorance is almost complete. The average man on the street, if asked, would say, well, I don't know if there are civilizations on Venus. I hope they're friendly. If they are, I hope they're friendly. I'm sure there are civilizations on Mars. I hope they're friendly. Maybe there are people on the moon. I have no idea. We now know that these are lifeless rocks. But in the 1940s, you didn't know that. So unless you're on a wavelength to be incredibly inventive in a way that doesn't rely on the ultimate veracity of what you're writing about, unless you're that, and it's not given to many writers to be that, then I don't know. I don't know. But I know one thing for sure. For the rest of this first week of Rocket Summer, which is the beginnings of science fiction to and through the 1930s, I'm sticking with Edgar Rice Burroughs. Thanks. Sorry, not sorry, as the kids say. The one person I need to apologize to is the one person who will not require an apology. You do not ever need to apologize to Michael K. Vaughan for reading Edgar Rice Burroughs. So I'm just going to stick with Edgar Rice Burroughs until next week. And then I will look around in the 1940s and see what real science fiction I can read. So there. So just a long weekend. I'm going to spend a long weekend luxuriating in Edgar Rice Burroughs. Maybe even luxuriating in more Barsoom novels, which I don't think I need to take you through. If I do that, is there a chance? My mind boggles at the idea. I am boggling at the idea. Even I am. But is there a chance that this weekend I might reread Thuvia, Maid of Mars? Which I have read not hundreds of times, but I literally probably more than 1,000 times in my life. Is there any excuse ever for me to read Thuvia, Maid of Mars? And yet, is there a chance that I will? I shouldn't do that. I should read the final book, John Carter of Mars. I should read that. It's 2 stories. I should do that instead. I've only read that a few hundred times. I haven't read that I don't know. I don't know what I'll do, but I'm not gonna risk any of the other pioneers of the genre. Thanks very much. I'll just stick to, for the rest of it. It's a long holiday weekend. It's gonna be hot. I'm just going to stick with Edgar Rice Burroughs. And then next week, we'll move on to the 1940s and see what we see. So I'll see you then. Thank you, BookTube.